Council to order. If you'd please stand and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Mayor?
Council-elect Olson's reminder to the council, this square that we're sitting at is an awful long ways from you. So we're going to do our best to project, enunciate our words so you can hear us. But if not, please wave or something, and then we'll pick up our voices. We do have some microphones in the ceiling, council, so we need to remember to speak up loudly and clearly so those listening at home and for the record they can hear us. Councilor Lidke.
I'd like to make a motion to remove agenda item Roman numeral 4, letter D, resolution 2024-2 from today's agenda.
In a motion to remove resolution 2024-2, is there a second?
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Lichty, second by Councilor Spickelmeyer to remove agenda item 4 under discussion items, letter D, resolution 2024-2. Councilor Lichty, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I was informed by the mayor and as well as ratepayers that they have received enough votes to disestablish without us taking action.
Without a public hearing, okay. Further discussion? Okay, those in favor, please signify by let's see, it's a roll call. Do we have to roll? Do we need to roll call? Just a voice only? Okay. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll remove item D, resolution 2024-2, and I read that for the record, considering the intention to establish the downtown Lewiston Business Improvement District action item, which included a resolution for a public hearing. So that's been removed from the agenda. Next up is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues in advance with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. And if you'll come up to the stand there where Dr. Ortman is at, please remember to introduce yourself, your city of residence. We don't need your home address. You have to speak up loudly and clearly. The floor is yours, Dr. Ortman.
I'll try to do that. I'm Dennis Ortman. Many of you know I'm a former counselor, a member of the BDL, a board, also a director for the Business Improvement District. I am the person who made the motion that you will now treat a little bit differently since the petition has been handed in. But I wanted to make just a couple of general comments. Some of us have had a long time to look at the city of Lewiston and to look at the downtown and the importance of that corridor. And some of us in this room have invested from hundreds to millions of dollars in working in that downtown corridor. It is the birth canal of our city, later turned into an artery that has had to have infusions along the way of both public and private capital for more than 160 years, and that's not going to go away. We know that the experiment that we dealt with in the Business Improvement District did not meet the expectations that we thought it would. But I hope that the councilors will continue their proud record of many years of support of the development of downtown. The infrastructure that you're already involved in is absolutely essential to the city in many dimensions, as is any kind of infusion that you do that will help build a corridor that is dynamic for people to enjoy in the future. I made that motion with great pain and agony at the last meeting. It's probably one of the most difficult motions I've made, but I have to tell you that I think downtown is worth it. You have a long history of supporting it, and I will stand behind you however you wish to move ahead through the accounting process, through the accountability process, through anything that you need. And I know as a director, that I can speak for the other directors as well. They will all cooperate with you as you move forward from this point. The downtown is vital. Sometimes you have to take out the tube and put it in, inject it in a different place with a different intent. And I think we can put lifeblood back into downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I do want to, thank you. No, you're good, but you just remind me of something. We have some new faces in the audience, and so if you've not been to one of these meetings before, this is your time to speak up. So if you're here to talk about child care licensing, the Idaho Child Challenge Program, or downtown Lewiston BID, prior to getting to those on the active agenda, this is your opportunity to stand up and tell us what you think. So please, if you have something to say, please share it with us. Thank you.
Sorry. Good afternoon, Mayor and Councilors. My name is Laura Wright, and I am in the city of Lewiston, actually in the outside the county area. I'm also on the Public Works Advisory Commission, and tonight, or this afternoon, I wanted to comment on item G, which was the discussion that you're going to be having on the capital improvement plan. I wanted to say that I'm in support of a citywide capital improvement plan, or CIP. A complete document allows for central location for projects citywide to be identified in various sources of funds, fees, and grants that can be allocated for these projects. With a complete CIP, it allows councilors to have the information on projects and their funding at their fingertips to be able to help with budgeting and identify the project status, as well as be more transparent to the community as it helps identify funds, what they can be used and not be used for, and for the status of funds dedicated to a project. Usually when funds have been identified for a project, an account fund can be established, and then that ensures that the funds are present for this project. In addition, it helps with grants. It allows to know the timelines for grants so that if reprioritization needs to be done, it can easily be tracked, and as well as the monies from other funds that may have an expiration date as well. A 5-year rolling CIP is a very concise document and allows for all departments to see what the various projects identified are, because sometimes, believe it or not, if you know about another project, they can be combined together, possibly to go after a different grant and make it a more stronger candidate for that funding. I do hope this will be considered today, as I think it will help staff, director, counselors, and the community at large to be able to check on the CIP project, whether from facilities and buildings, parks and recs, public works, which could be streets, wastewater, stormwater, and all the other departments within a city. I have worked on these projects to be included within a CIP and have felt it has always beneficial to have it front and center to be able to demonstrate to the council if I had achieved funding and requesting additional funding to complete a project. It is an excellent tool for dialogue and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for your service too on the committee. Further citizen comments? Vicki? Welcome.
My name is Vicki Ross, and I'm from Moscow, Idaho. And I am also one of the ratepayers who painstakingly signed the petition to dissolve the Downtown Lewiston Business Improvement District. Reached out to a lot of the ratepayers in the district over the last month and a half on their opinions of the BID and why we saw failure in it. And I'm here just to provide the feedback that I received from the ratepayers that you've received the petitions from. The majority of them would like to see the approximately $157,000 that's in the BID designated account refunded back to the ratepayers that paid in. They would also like a full accounting report of where their money that has been spent prior to that has gone. And there is tangibles that have been purchased as far as planters, benches, and trash receptacles, as well as a sunshade for Brackenberry Square. The ratepayers that are not in the direct downtown Main Street core feel that it was very inequitable, the way that the money was spent. And we are suggesting, with this feedback that we received, that the city, the BID advisory board, and the department heads from street department and Parks and Rec consider placing those items in the fringe areas of Idaho Street, D Street, and F Street, where purpose could be given to those items that their money was used for. Very much.
Thank you.
Further citizen comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to Roman numeral 4, discussion items. Please note that identifying an item as an action item does not require the city council to vote on that item. Item A, childcare licensing. Discussion of relegating childcare licensing from the city of Lewiston to the state of Idaho. This is an action item. We have with us today our Community Development Director, Shannon Groh. Shannon, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and remember to speak up loudly and clearly for the record. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. Shannon Groh, Community Development Director for the City of Lewiston. Today we are here to discuss childcare licensing and what the staff has done to date, give you an idea of what's going on now and some possible changes that could be considered, and what we're looking for is direction from the council on moving forward with some of those changes. I'm pretty much just going to highlight some of the items that I put in my memo for the staff report that's in your packet. Childcare in Idaho is authorized by Title 39 of the Idaho Code, Chapter 11, and IDAPA. And the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare has the authority to administer these rules. Cities in Idaho can choose to do childcare licensing as well if they want to be more restrictive than the state rules. So state is kind of your minimum base. If cities want to be more restrictive, then that's when they choose to do childcare licensing. The city of Lewiston has done that for many, many years. The current staff does not know why the city chose to do that, but there are 2 cities in District 2, Lewiston and Moscow, that do childcare licensing. The rest are done by the state of Idaho. So, there are a few items where the city of Lewiston is currently more restrictive than the state. In 2011, the state changed rules, and it's my understanding that at that time, the rules really started to kind of aligning between the state and the city, and they have kind of continued on that path since. But there are a few areas where the city is still more restrictive than the state is. And those areas are the outdoor play area, where the city requires a fenced outdoor play area of 35 square feet. This is not a state requirement. The second area is CPR first aid. The city requires all employees to have pediatric CPR and first aid certification. The state also requires this, but it's not of all employees of the child care center or child care provider. Additionally, criminal history checks. The city requires annual local criminal history checks of employees and volunteers on an annual basis, and FBI criminal history checks every 5 years. The state also requires these FBI criminal checks every 5 years, but doesn't require annual checks. However, the state does have provisions that allow them to request background checks if anyone at any time that comes into contact with children at the child care facilities. Additionally, there's a little bit of nuance between the groupings between the city and the state, where the city has 3 groupings, which would be a family childcare group, childcare, and childcare center. The state also has family home of 6 or fewer, a group of 7 to 12 children, small center 13 to 25, and large center of 26 or more children. So the difference there is that the centers The state breaks it up into two, whereas the city, 13 or more children, all centers. One of the things that the state does not require that the city does is that family home of 6 or fewer children does not require licensing in the state of Idaho. They can still choose to be licensed, but it is not a requirement. However, where the city does not require nonprofit agencies to license childcare, the state does require that. So there's a little bit of a nuance between the two. Additionally, fees between the two. The City of Lewiston is based on employees. That's how all, pretty much all City of Lewiston business licenses are calculated. The state has set fees that are lined out in your packet, and they are every 2 years, where ours is an annual. So if licensing were turned over to the state, there would still be city review of these licenses. For example, if it's a new license or it's a renewal that has a change, maybe they're adding more children or they've changed addresses, then the city would still, there would be a local jurisdiction compliance on any renewals. The difference would be that if there's changes or if it's new, building and zoning would take a look at it just to make sure that we have, maybe there needs to be a conditional use permit, or maybe there's something that the city would require still. Fire inspections would be required with all renewals of childcare licensing, so you'd see that coming through. As to a city business license, we do not have to require them if the council chooses not to, if they're turned over to the state. And we do that currently with like HVAC contractors. So that would not be a new practice with the city. Community Development Department wanted to do some outreach, and so we did reach out to childcare providers and had a kind of a listening session in January, and we were able to talk with providers, answer questions that they had. There were a couple of concerns that were brought up at that time, and one of the concerns was that the state does not require family childcare with 6 or fewer kids to be licensed. They were also concerned on how long, if we made this change, how long would that current license be good for? We as staff would recommend that there would be a transition period where, let's say, we would say, we're no longer going to issue any more licenses or renewals after August 1st, but your license, if it was issued in June, is good till the next June. So you have that full year to have it required. And so we would have kind of this transitional area where folks wouldn't be, the last thing we want to do is have somebody unlicensed. And so we really want to have that more of a transition rather than just cutting it off. The other thing was questions arose about, would the city still require a business license? And so that could be determined through whatever code changes we bring forth to the council and can be discussed at that time. So staff, after reviewing this, staff is looking for direction from the council on whether or not you would like us to move forward with code changes to make this transition happen and relegate childcare licensing to the state of Idaho.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Forsman?
So are they currently, I can't remember because I know we briefly talked about it, are they currently paying for the city and state? Or are they only, like
Only
one rides over the other, so not being double charged?
Correct.
Councilor Spicklemeyer?
Thanks. So Director, how much of a staffing burden is there if it was moved to the state or the city?
So there's about 30 to 35, let's say, childcare licenses that are issued each year for the city of Lewiston. That is a very small percentage comparative to the amount of licenses that are approved through this department. However, daycares, because of all of those local background checks, do require a lot of extra touches that other licenses don't require with the city, if that makes any sense. So it's not a huge administrative burden per se. We really went into this because the mayor wanted myself to look at processes within the community development department and see if I could look at them. Are they appropriate still? Should we cut some red tape? Those types of things. This one seemed to be an easy one to look at because of the already state requirements with it. We're looking at other processes, such as in the building department, we've already reduced permit review times. So this is one of those things that we just looked at and said, maybe this is something to explore.
Director, can you comment on the public health's role in childcare here in the city?
You probably know more about it than I do. But public health, the daycare providers would be working with local folks here, and they would still be doing inspections throughout these, whether they're licensed with the city or were licensed with the state. There's a touch with local Department of Health. So whether or not the city does those inspections still happen. I don't know if you wanted to add to that. Okay.
Counselor Forsman?
Is there a cost difference between what they pay to the state versus?
Yeah. So
Have that in there.
on the second, yes, I do. On the second page of that memo, it has a little table that shows you I can't do a side-by-side comparison.
Okay.
And the reason why I can't is because our licensing is always dependent on the number of employees, which is probably something I'm gonna be bringing to you in a future work session. But, so for example, if a group facility, 7 to 12 children, let's say they had 10 employees, we would charge a certain fee annually for that based on the number of employees. Whereas, and our minimum is 94, so that's 0 to 5 employees. You can see here that for a family home, it would be $100 every 2 years. For a group facility, it's every 2 years as well, $100. A small center is $250 every 2 years, and a large center would be $325 every 2 years.
So essentially, it's less money. Sorry,
Yes.
I should have.
Yes,
said-
I mean, we don't currently know what, if the state wants to raise fees. We haven't
Right,
heard that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Speckelmeyer?
So when you listed off several things, one of them being the fenced yard, another one was the CPR training, those are things that are different, they aren't, and other things you said that the state has come within the same what the city had before, but those were different right now.
Those are different right now, correct.
Counselor Lidke?
I know a lot about the Idaho Stars program. I feel that the state, it's a high priority within the state legislature and on down, that they are trying to create avenues to encourage people to get into the childcare business, because we need people to get to work and they need to have childcare. I think the Idaho Stars program is full of great guidelines and incentives that daycares can work towards to get actual higher reimbursement rates for those that qualify for state assistance. I think if it creates efficiencies within your department, I'm for letting the state take it on. It gives clarity to providers that they only have to go to one location, figure out what they need to do, and it drives the state to make sure they're paying attention to all sizes of daycare. So I think this would be a great way to alleviate some, probably by the revenue you bring in and the work hours spent, we're giving providers more opportunity to work with the state and gain avenues of improving their daycare and your staff more productivity. So I think it's a great transition out.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up Idaho Stars. So I should have mentioned that we have been working with representatives from Idaho Stars, some of them are here today, and they have been so helpful and just very generous with their time, and are willing to help out, kind of hold people's hands while this transition process happens. And so we really appreciate them coming to the table with us and helping us understand the rules, but also very willing to help the childcare providers with this possible transition as well.
Director, I took my eyes off the back row over there, and I see Darla sitting back there. And I'm gonna ask her if she wouldn't mind just standing up, taking the stand, and just give us your level of comfort with this proposal by our staff to let the state be the lead on this within the city limits.
Darla Amundson, Lewiston, Idaho. I honestly, once we met with the city last month and then an additional meeting, I felt like it's a great transition. City will still have their local jurisdiction to see if there's any additional things that you want providers to comply with. But having all providers in one database so we can support them with CPR, first aid trainings that they need, I think would be a benefit.
Thank you, Darla. Any quick questions for Darla? She didn't ask for this, but
Oh.
thank you.
No, not for Darla.
Counselor
Thank you.
Forsman?
No, it wasn't for Darla, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Darla. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Grohl, Counselor Forsman, did you have a question?
So with the only thing with, I was seeing that fence requirement, concern, is that something that could be into like the not, I guess it's not business licensing, but like a conditional use permit type requirements, or is there some area that we can still place something like that for?
Probably not across the board. Certainly with conditional use permits, those can come into play with the conditions, but not all daycares require a conditional use permit.
Right, okay.
I have a question. Just
Counselor Lickey.
put your mind at ease. Do you know any daycares that let the kids go out without a fenced yard?
Not currently, but it's possible.
Only speaking as a mom, as kids in daycare, little guys, so.
It's my understanding that some of the family daycares also, they choose to be licensed because they want to be, as part of the database, they want to be found. And I should also mention that one of the concerns from the daycare providers was, do we have to be ICCP certified? Meaning, do we have to accept state assistance? And the answer is no. With this transition, you're simply just getting licensed through the state. You can choose to do those things if you would like to, but it's not going to force you to do those things. One of the other concerns that we had through email was, what if the state changes their requirements? Well, the state is the base. If they change the requirements and the city's licensing, you would have to follow those rules. So that doesn't really make them follow more rules. Again, cities do this because they want to be more restrictive. In this case, Lewiston is just not enough more restrictive to probably continue this practice.
Counselor Forsman.
This sounds like a good move for me. I mean, as far as the gate goes, obviously, a parent can choose or choose not to bring their kid in that daycare if they have uncomfortability with how the daycare is ran. So it's not a huge deal, it was just more of a question to clarify. But I think this is a good move. Hopefully this will make it easier for them and hopefully they'll get more support. I know getting daycares in this valley right now is kind of hard, and there's a lot of parents looking for quality daycare, so hopefully this will start helping making that pathway. So appreciate your time that you and your staff spent on this and bringing it to the table.
Thank you, Counselor. If I heard Director Grohl, she's looking for some direction. Could be a motion to move forward with transitioning childcare licensing from the city to the state over a 1-year time frame, and then to exempt childcare from city business licensing requirements. On your mark. Set.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor
I'll make
Lickey.
the motion to direct staff to transition from daycare oversight under our city code to state oversight over the next year.
Second.
Counselor, would you like to address city business licensing also in your motion?
Yeah, what did you say?
That one, okay. It's been moved by Counselor Lickey, seconded by Counselor Forsman to direct staff to transition childcare licensing from the city to the state over a 1-year time frame, and to exempt childcare from city business licensing requirements. That's the motion and the second. Is there discussion? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Council. Councilors, next up, we have item 4B, Idaho Job Challenge Program, presentation by Lewiston Independent School District Number 1 Superintendent Lance Hanson. It looks like he might have
I have some guests, or a guest.
some guests with him. I saw your partner earlier today, Sean Teagues. He's a wonderful, wonderful superintendent for the Moscow School District.
Thank you, Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to visit with yourself and the council. I'm going to give you kind of some overarching big picture things about Job Challenge. I actually have the expert on Job Challenge, Trevor Sparrow, and he's going to come up and be able to give you the specifics about what it is. My ask of the City Council, I'll state it here and then I'll reinforce it afterwards, is that City Council supports Job Challenge being in Lewiston. That's my ask, as simple as I can say. And that would become somewhat in a letter of support. So what does that mean? Job Challenge is an opportunity for students who graduate from Idaho Youth Challenge to continue their education and get job skills or job training that go into high demand jobs that put them into an environment that bridges that gap between graduation and employment. And that goes into living wage jobs. And those jobs are defined by the governors or the state's in high demand jobs, which are healthcare, education, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So why Lewiston? Well, first of all, it's proximate to Idaho Youth Challenge, which is in Pierce, Idaho. Why Lewiston? Because we have the educational structure in which to facilitate this. We have Lewis Clark State, Walla Walla Community College right here, where our students or the students who complete their graduation from Idaho Youth Challenge can go into those careers or high need areas, and the training is here. We also happen to have a facility that we're interested in them using. The other thing, and you say, well, why is the ask here? I believe that Idaho Youth Challenge is going to be somewhere in the state of Idaho. I want it in Lewiston. I don't want it down in the Boise Valley. I want it here. So every time we have the opportunity to talk to anyone about that, encourage our local representatives, anybody who might have the ear of the governor, anybody in the governor's office, and Trevor's going to talk to you about a little bit about the funding aspect of that. We want to make sure that they know, Lieutenant Governor Bedke, that he knows that Lewiston, Idaho is the choice. We're talking 22 to 25, and again, he'll give the specifics, living wage jobs that will be infused. I've been set on many Valley Vision work groups to encourage businesses to come to Lewiston. This is just another example of that. We have extended support right now. We've already spoken to the mayor, hoping that he will give us a letter of support. We have letter of support from Dr. Cindy Pemberton at Lewis Clark State College. We have letters of support from, hopefully from CETA. We have letters of support who've come from the Boys and Girls Club, who will be the neighbors. We have letters of support from Civic Theater, who's also currently the occupant of the particular facility if they choose to use that. So that's kind of the big picture. I'm going to let Trevor talk to you about the specific of Job Challenge on what the program is. I just want you to keep you in mind what the ask is. The ask isn't whether or not Job Challenge is good or bad. The ask is to make sure that it's in Lewiston, Idaho, and that's what my ask is. Trevor?
Thank you, Superintendent.
And
Trevor, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Sure, my name is Trevor Sparrow, and I'm the program director for the Idaho Youth Challenge Academy in Pierce. I just wanted to briefly touch on, for those maybe in the audience or maybe the council that don't know what Youth Challenge is, hopefully everybody does by now. We've been around for about 10 years. It's a state of Idaho program ran by the Idaho Military Division and National Guard Bureau. Funds our program 75%. The only thing that's asked of the state is a 25% state match. And this funding formula for Job Challenge is the same. It's a 75-25 match. So the state of Idaho would be required to match 75% or 25% of our overall budget ask for Job Challenge. But we are currently in our 21st class. Our first class of Youth Challenge started in 2014, and we've had almost 2,200 graduates from our program in the last 10 years. In fact, we're doing a 10-year celebration down in Boise this year, which we're pretty excited about. Out of those 2,200 graduates. We've had 200 high school diplomas earned and approximately 150 GED earned. And then the rest of those, we have about 20,000 high school credits that have been earned. And all those kids go back to their local high schools and get re-engaged. The reason why, and I'm going to mention this too, because I know that you've seen the product of some of our service in the community events with the lights here in Lewiston. Our cadets often come over and help put up the lights and a few other things like with Hell's Gate. We've done 67,000 hours almost in the last 10 years of service to the community and the region. Those kind of things teach our kids about proper job skills. They teach them how to work. They teach them educational skills. We like to give our kids, our graduates, a chance to interview for jobs while they're there and learn valuable skills that help them move forward. Job Challenge was kind of conceptualized about 5 years ago at the national level with the Department of Labor provided Challenge a few grants. 4 different challenge programs in the nation started Job Challenge based on these grants. And these kids, the kids that, the reason why the need is there is that a lot of the kids that come to our program don't do well in the traditional educational setting. They thrive on the structure that we provide. It's a quasi-military residential program. So they come and they learn how to do drill and ceremony. They learn military customs and courtesies. And that helps them as they move forward in their educational pursuits. Because it helps provide a structure that a lot of times they are craving. And a lot of times it will assist them going forward. Reason why we need a job challenge here in Idaho. Out of our 2,200 graduates, approximately 850 of those are eligible to attend Job Challenge, meaning we extend past, so Youth Challenge is typically 16 to 18-year-olds. Job Challenge is eligible for 17 to 21-year-olds, so we can take some of our past graduates that we've already had and they can come back. What Job Challenge is basically another residential setting that they come and we employ not as heavy of a quasi-military structure as Youth Challenge because we want to have more of the community college feel, but they still wear uniforms, they still attend classes that we provide on site. But our hope is with some of the business partners in town, whether it be the hospital, LCSC, some of those high demand jobs in the area, that they go out in the community and take part in the classes in the community as well. So some have asked why are we trying to duplicate something that's already available? The governor's got a great, the launch program is a great opportunity for high school seniors that are starting to graduate high school, but that doesn't apply to some of those that have already graduated, especially some of our high school graduates that have already graduated. They can't apply for that funding, and they're kind of stuck in that bubble where they're still maybe at home, or they still can't apply for federal funding to help them with their schooling. So this helps give them a leg up. All of the programming at Job Challenge is vocational based, so and soft skills based. I don't know what the proper term is nowadays. Soft skills would be politically correct, but so we teach them we continue that educational training, how to interview for jobs. We continue to teach them the life coping skills that we do at the Youth Challenge Academy, but kind of enhance it so they work on projects that relate to their vocational training. And then the goal that the absolute must, as far as federal dollars are spent and required of all of our graduates, is they have some kind of job certification in a high demand field before they graduate, whether that be in CNA or a CDL or in any kind of the welding fields, some kind of introductory certificate that will hopefully help them go on, hopefully to one of our local providers if they like the classes at LCSC or so forth. So superintendent talked about the 22 to 26 jobs. the minimum wage at any of those jobs would be $42,000 a year, and that is increasing. Then we have a unique opportunity here, and this is my last talking point before I just open up for questions, but our unique opportunity is that current funding model going forward for Job Challenge is a regional concept. So our challenge program is not the only one nationwide. There's 40 other programs. The top 4 of the top 5 programs happen to be in the surrounding states. Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Montana are 4 of the top 5 programs in the nation. We can't invite Oklahoma because they're in the Midwest, but the concept that we have and the great, one of the biggest reasons for Lewiston is kind of a central location between all of those states to have a regional job challenge. That would help provide some of the funding as far as our state match, because we have memorandums with those states. So the funding model is easily, I believe, is easily accessible. But the biggest benefit, I think, to Lewiston would be to bring some of these, even the out-of-state kids, and train them here locally, and hopefully retain them and keep them locally, to show them what we have to offer here in the Lewiston, Clarkston Valley. So, questions for me?
Thank you, Trevor. Counselor Spickelmeyer?
So how long is the program for a particular student?
For the Job Challenge, it's anywhere from 10 to 22 weeks. So Youth Challenge is a set 22 weeks, but the Job Challenge is a minimum of 10 weeks, maximum of 22, just depending on the certification that they're working on. If they're done, there's no need to keep them, and they move on to go home. So.
Counselor Ledke?
Housing.
Housing. So housing would be on site at the program. Is it okay to mention the building, or? Sure. I noticed we're looking at the old Lewiston High School. That would be big enough to put housing on the second floor there and for these cadets to live on site there.
Counselor Ledke?
So, 22 weeks or 10 weeks, is there going to be supports and resources in place? Because you mentioned that we'd like to keep them here. We have a lack of housing, so after they're certified and have, certificate in hand and they're looking for a job, are there gonna be other resources available?
I think that's a great opportunity for partners such as CETA, working with CETA and some other local community agencies to work on them. Right now, we're not at that point as far as looking at what those resources are.
Here.
Counselor Forsman?
And so if I have this right, you're more just looking for a letter of support, not funds at this current time, and you get 25% from the state. So is that, I understand?
Yes, I guess I could offer an explanation there. So there are a couple of sites that are being explored, Lewiston being one. The other site that's been approved is down in Wilder, and down in Boise Valley. And so it would be a little more difficult for us to travel down and help administer that program. But this site we think would work the best. So what we're doing right now is just garnering support for the program to be here in Lewiston, and then we'll take that to the governor's office and legislators and move forward with the ask as far as the official budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I just wrap up,
Superintendent,
please?
please, if you'd like
Thank you.
to. Thank you, Trevor.
Yes.
Thank you.
So again, thank you for the question. Again, we're not asking the council for any money. That's not the ask. The ask is for the support. We believe that if we inundate the governor's office with the support from our community, which includes the Chamber of Commerce, Valley Vision, the mayor, city council, and we just keep listing them, that they will have to listen to us and hopefully, and I'm gonna do a TV thing here pretty soon to let them know that this is the right place for this program. The program must sell itself. Having the opportunity for our students or any students to get between, and Trevor talked about this, when they leave a structured environment, this gets them to career, where before it got them back into whatever environment they came back to. This changes the narrative. It also provides that opportunity for workers. You know, the governor's been big on workforce development, workforce training, launch, which is great. If you can have the programs. What we're lacking is the people. When I talk to businesses, even in my industry, we can't find people. We need people. This provides the people. He has 800 graduates that potentially would have the opportunity to go to this program to receive the training. We want it in Lewiston. We have the best opportunity for that to take place and the best, training, et cetera, and the best environment, best city, whatever. They don't need anything else. I told Lieutenant Governor, you don't need it down in Boise. So again, the ask would be a letter of support, and I'd be happy to provide the talking points, whatever that would look like from the council. And I appreciate Mayor Johnson providing the opportunity for me to speak to council.
Councilors?
So we need a motion.
Councilor Schroeder.
I'd like to move that we create a letter to the governor,
Just letter of support.
just a letter of support in behalf of the job challenge. Second.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Councilor Lidkey, to have Mayor's office draft a letter of support for the Idaho Job Challenge program. And councilors, if you'd like, I can sign that on behalf of the city, or if you'd like to sign it, I'm happy to put a big signature block on that. What's your preference?
Half of the city's fine for me.
Well, I don't know, it looks better with all those things
More
on
the
there, so
merrier.
why don't we put a big
Okay,
block on
we
it?
can do it that way too.
Yeah.
Well, I will put a large signature block on it.
Okay.
Further discussion? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll get one in the mail. Superintendent, thank you. So the
Thank you
sooner
very
you can get that
Thank you.
to myself or Tanya, then we'll get the letter put into the King's language and I'll circulate it for signatures and we'll get it out.
Big one.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, next up, we have item 4C, Downtown Lewiston Business Improvement District, presentation and recommendation by the Downtown Business Improvement District Advisory Board Chairperson, Tammy Myers, and Vice Chairperson, Peter Cook. So again, I'd ask you to come up here, and remember that you have microphones above you, but if you just kind of project your voice, they'll hear you online. Introduce yourself for the record. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tammy Myers from Lewiston.
I'm Pete Cook from Lewiston.
Part of our presentation today would have been this resolution, but obviously your next item is no longer on the table, so I don't think that matters. So we'll just do a brief comment from the advisory board. So the Business Improvement District Advisory Board stands united in supporting the dissolution of the Business Improvement District, BID. We suggest that the ownership of the BID purchased planters, benches, trash receptacles, and sunshades be transferred to the city of Lewiston with the understanding that their installation and maintenance be taken on by the city. All other miscellaneous items purchased by the BID for support of downtown events to become the property of BDL for its continued use during those events. We advocate returning the surplus funds of $152,980.86, less the cost of planter installation to the BID ratepayers proportionate to their contributions. Planter installation has been initiated, and that estimated cost is $3,757, plus some additional costs for the potting soil itself. And just to comment a little bit on Vicky's public comment, I do believe there's enough planters to extend them all the way down Main Street to about, I think 13th or so, and then also on D Street. So I don't know about the F Street portion, but I'm sure we could look at that. While this endeavor did not meet expectations, the spirit of our downtown is flourishing. So we want to thank all the BID advisory board members, BDL, and the city staff for your time and energy of the BID.
Peter, you want to share a word or two?
Nope, I'm fine.
Well,
I guess I could comment that we were just elected, both of us in January, and we are the have the least amount of time on the advisory committee, so keep that in mind,
Do you
sorry.
stand for any questions the council may have?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Counselors? Any questions? No? Okay, wow, that was easy.
Oh,
Thank
scot
you.
free.
Thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
both. Yeah,
Thanks, Tammy.
we heard the request, thank you.
Jennifer Tigano, Assistant City Attorney. As of now, with the BID receiving all of the petitions to disestablish, there was still the question about the collection of the March 1st special assessments. Previously, during their last meeting, the BID board had included as a part of their motion to disestablish the district to suspend billing and collection of those March 1st special assessments. The process to disestablish will take some time, so it's recommended that the city council make a decision on whether or not the city will continue with billing and collecting those special assessments, with the recommendation of the BID board previously having been to suspend those. Not to put any words in their mouth, but I did watch their meeting, so that was their recommendation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Councilors, questions or motions?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Ledke?
I also watched that meeting and I would move that we suspend all future charges to ratepayers. What's the motion need to be? Is that good enough?
Motion to suspend billing and collection of the March 1st special assessments for the downtown Lewiston Business Improvement District.
That's exactly what I said.
Second?
Where's the second?
Right here.
It's been moved by Councilor Lidke, second by Councilor Schroeder to suspend billing and collection of the March 1st special assessments for the downtown Lewiston Business Improvement District. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Councilors, next up, we move to item E under discussion items, Normal Hill Cemetery Master Plan Review. Progress review of recommendations from the master plan consultant related to the cemetery. This is an action item. We have with us our Parks and Recreation Director, Tim Barker. Director Barker, please remember to speak up loudly and clearly, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. You guys are welcome to stick around and listen to the cemetery discussion. It's always exciting.
Like, yeah, no. I'm good.
Let's see if I can find a cursor here.
Cemeteries are the most riveting, lively sketch measures.
Yeah, we're gonna liven this up now. Tim Barker, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Lewiston. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for giving us an opportunity to talk today and provide you an update related to the work that we've been doing on the master plan. Back in October, it was requested from council that the commission sits down and starts to go through the 2015 Normal Hill Cemetery Master Plan and start addressing and looking at and summarizing and making changes. As it noted in the actual master plan that there was a 5-year review done that we hadn't physically done. And so what we'll be discussing today, I'm here, Shirley Phillips, our chair of the commission, is here as well. We'll be talking about a couple of the sections within the plan, discussing the undeveloped portion of the property, but really just kind of talking more about what our work is going to be over the next few months, ultimately leading to a full update of that plan by this next fall at the latest. So just as a reminder, the purpose of the plan when we sat down and started looking at this back in probably 2012 timeframe was we were looking for a reason and a way to guide the cemetery towards a model of long-term sustainability was really kind of that number one. In the 125-year history of the cemetery, we never really had a full master plan in place. Part of the reason for the plan too was that we were really getting low on inventory, and moving forward we had to create some sort of structure to address the new needs that are out in in the community and the different burial options. So really, that's what drove the commission to request council back at that time funding for this master plan project. So we wanted to make sure that we had the resources available to meet the internment needs as noted there, and then obviously creating a path for future development, whether it be at that site or at alternate locations. One of the things that was discussed in the October meeting was what has been accomplished. And so when we sat down as a commission, which they chose me as the spokesperson, by the way, I tried to get all of them to take the role on, but none of them wanted to take the lead. Shirley will make some comments later, but so the message that I'm giving you today is really from the commission and their discussions, not necessarily staff's perspective. So one of the things we, like I said, mentioned was, what has been accomplished as far as the recommendations from Lees and Associates at that time. And when we started breaking it down, looking at the budget cycle, we started, obviously identifying, okay, well, we have been making requests, but they haven't all been supported. And so that's where the green, if you can see that on there, those are items that were funded. So for FY 2015 and 2016, over a 2-year time, and I think maybe we did do 20,000 each year. That was the funding for that master plan to be created, and it was completed in December of 2015. So FY 16, there was no funding that was requested because we were already in that once the plan came out. So that's when we looked at 2017. What types of things did we want to look at addressing and the needs that we had? And that's where you'll see in 17, there was a couple major items. One was $50,000 towards the cemetery mausoleum improvements. That's a building that's nearing 100 years old on site. That was having some significant cracking occurring. There was some issues with roof there, the windows, a number of different things. We just needed to freshen up and do some structural work to that. So it was not funded in 2017. However, it was requested, but you'll see later it was eventually supported. Also not funded was the phase 1 approach, and I'll show you in a couple slides down, the undeveloped section. One of the biggest feedback pieces we received from the community when we went out during that master planning process was they wanted to see something happening with that undeveloped area besides us stockpiling and using it for material, not just at the city or the college, but for some of our other city projects. They wanted to see something physically happening. And so that's where that $244,000 request was for. And you can see there what types of things, essentially making open green space area until we were going to be looking at developing cemetery plots there, but greening it up and starting those trees and bush areas too, so then you could start to see something happen. That was not funded as part of that FY 2017. A position was funded, and you'll notice there it said 6 months in back at that time frame, and still now. Sometimes for budgeting purposes, it's easier to bring a position in mid-year and then you fully fund it the next year to kind of ease the budget a little bit. And so that's what that process was prior to, and actually now, we were utilizing park maintenance staff essentially to run the cemetery. We did not have a designated staff person. We've had a 20-hour-a-week person probably back in the early 2010s to 12s, a 20-hour-a-week person that basically essentially worked like a 10 to 2 shift or an 8 to 12, but we weren't able to be open all day. And so when that position came on board, then we were able to have a full-time staff person there to start helping on site to be able to address some of the recommendations within the cemetery master plan. So moving to 2018, obviously the $244,000 was not supported in the previous year, so we started to break things down. $30,000 to extend a water line, $20,000 to be able to put an irrigation system in, and then additional $10,000 for creating that green space area. Those 3 items weren't supported during that fiscal year. The next year, we decided to move away from that request, and then we requested again the mausoleum improvements, which we pared down from the 50,000 that was originally requested. Then moving to 2020, we did receive some funding, as you can see. The columbarium and cremation garden area, that's really kind of that focal point that the commission decided to really gear into. It was various cremation options that were going to be able to be available for families to utilize. About 70% of internments are now done through cremation as opposed to full bodies. And so we really needed to address that within our system because we were very limited in cremation options. And then this would create various options for individuals, families, various different things, and beautify kind of that area around the mausoleum as well. And so that's where some of the funding started in 2020. There was support for a buyback program. This was something else we were looking at and was recommended until we were to address the need to develop the undeveloped about 7 acres on the south side. This is something that would allow someone, if they didn't want to try to sell their plots on the open market, if they were choosing not to utilize them, we would purchase those back from them to try to increase our inventory, which we have had some interest early on in that program. It's been fairly slow since then, since that initial marketing of that. Then the 5,500 is related to that cremation columbarium area. We had a landscape plan put in place and a project essentially started at that point. Let's see.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Lidkey.
can I interject, or do you want to?
Absolutely.
So can you explain the funding, because I'm a little confused now. So they funded the columbarium but not developed, so, and then the 20,000 was developed, so the costs, if it wasn't done, where'd that money go? And like, I'm still trying to figure out, did you set aside 20 grand to do the buyback, or was that for marketing?
So the 20,000 was set aside for the buyback program. And essentially we utilized, we do often get phone calls, people coming in, and we have a list of people that want to individually sell their plots. And so when we received those interests, that's part of the marketing that we did, and we used some social media as well to market that buyback program. But the 20,000 wasn't towards the marketing, it was towards the purchasing of those plots if someone didn't want to deal with selling it on the open market. That help?
Yes.
And then I'll talk a little bit later too, because you'll see a few areas where columbarium project was funded, but yet we don't have a columbarium yet, and that's because about that 2020 timeframe during COVID, prices really skyrocketed, basically tripled. So we're looking at about 80,000 now for a columbarium.
So are those funds carried forward? I'm just trying to remember. if I saw
Some
it.
they were carried forward, otherwise they move into the reserves if they're unused. And so let's say that there was 30,000 in there one year, we didn't use it that year, but we didn't plan to spend it the next year. Or if for some reason we did and we had funding come available, then that's how budget amendments tend to occur is, okay, now we can afford, or we have the funding to utilize that 30,000 from 2020, but we have to do it a budget amendment because it wasn't initially anticipated to be utilized in that year. So it is there. It just hasn't been used. Okay, and then in 2021, again, we started looking at a potential market analysis. Also that year, the cemetery office position became a shared role down at City Hall. So it was essentially a part-time or deputy city clerk / cemetery administrative assistant role, and then eventually that position was moved away from the cemetery. And so the 65,000 that's there, that's not new funding that was requested. That was essentially just repurposing a portion of that position with some of the other funding to create some seasonal labor positions. At that point, we were starting to have some issues with consistency of our inmate labor program. And so we were needing to look at an alternate way to create staffing and funding for that if that program was to go away. And some of those years, not much of that funding was utilized, so that money went back into the general fund. 2022, again, additional $25,000 was provided towards the columbarium project. And as noted, we're still about $25,000 short from what we would like or need to have to be able to put in a columbarium, which again would be able to house about 144 cremations, depending on various rates. I mean, we're between about $800 or $600 to $1,200, depending on the size of your niche within that. And then in 2023, council supported that market analysis piece again. The areas that we were originally looking at addressing are sections 4.5, which are the governance and operations, and then the other section that we've been focusing on so far since October was the products and services. I'm not going to go through all of these to spare you some time, but everything that's listed here as a bullet point has been a discussion point. Whether we've moved forward with it or not, we've had a discussion on it at a Urban Forestry and Cemetery Commission meeting at some point since 2016. One that I'll just note a couple that I took some extra notes on. Obviously, we assess the appropriate staffing to support the cemetery, and that's when that position came on as the assistant. And then at that time, the city manager felt that there was a need also down at City Hall, so then it became kind of a split position, which took them away from really kind of helping get the structure in place at the cemetery at that time, and then it eventually was removed. So at one point during that time frame, we were open an 8 to 5 shift, and then it cut back to essentially 4 hours a day in the morning. The staffing side, until we really get moving forward and developing more of the cemetery and providing more options, a lot of the communication that we have isn't necessarily pre-need where someone is buying a plot ahead of time. It's an as-needed basis, and most of those conversations really happen right now at the funeral homes. And so we have more communication about the purchasing of plots and funeral services directly from our local funeral service providers as opposed to the actual families. So that's kind of changed a little bit of how the office, not everything is ran exactly directly through our office areas. One of the other things I just wanted to note, just in case you didn't understand what it meant, was tenders, cemetery, opening and closing services at the cemetery. What that refers to is we have a contract with Wilbert's to come and dig the grave and then put the dirt back on top. So we've found that at least until we see a higher need or more burials occurring, it doesn't make sense for have the equipment sitting on site and utilizing our staff if we're only doing 2 to 4 burials per month right now. It makes a lot more sense to just continue to contract that. Those prices, as part of our fee increases this last year, those did jump quite a bit, and so we are looking deeper into other options this next year, and we may look at opening that contract back up and seeing if there is some competition out there that has some interest in doing that. As far as products and services, again, these are all items that have been discussed at one point or another with the commission. Obviously, the third bullet there, adding columbarium niches. So we've gone through and we've done essentially a master plan of niche options, scattering garden options, and then done a full design around the mausoleum. So then that will eventually be built out. Seems like a small area, but we're also looking at a total cost to the city to do that development of probably somewhere between $750,000 to $1 million, just for providing niche options that would give us niches for many, many years. One other one I'll point out is increase pricing. Increase prices annually at the rate of inflation. We're talking currently about getting to that. We've done 2 price increases since 2016, and that's been mostly working and looking at what our comparables are, which is on the last page of the handout that you received in your packet and today. Just kind of notes. We do watch local market, but then we also do watch other governmental entities that operate cemeteries and do some price comparisons there. But we did agree that we will be moving forward and just planning to, at a minimum, work with the rate of inflation on that. One other one I'll note is that we've looked at this too within the recreation side of things. Is do we want to get to a point where we're charging resident rate versus non-resident rate, or a resident discount versus a regular rate for programs? And the thought process is kind of all over the board on that too. We don't want to deter someone from utilizing our services or price ourselves out. So at this point, we haven't decided to move forward with that at this point. Next slide talks about the conceptual plan, and so this is what I was speaking of related to the phase 1. So if you can see my cursor up there, phase 1 essentially was the exterior trees, bringing water. At that point, we didn't have water to the site on the south side there, putting turf down and cleaning up this whole area and just making it green for now until we looked forward. The future phases 2, 3, and 4 included the interior access road areas. These aren't travel lanes. That's definitely something that through the design process, the neighborhood said we do not want 16th going all the way through over to 7th. So we've cut the blue marker there is just pedestrian access, but then this is just to be able to move within the site. But a lot of full body options, and then really the purple areas in this location are more of your cremation. And then one thing that was really something that the public wanted to see was this yellow star area in the middle. That's almost like a gazebo area where we could have services and other types of activities in that space. So that's kind of what that master plan looked like. They didn't give us a detailed design plan. That was more just a conceptual as part of the work that they did with the master plan. So the commission, we've talked the last couple months at length, probably at least 3 hours on these items. So commissions in the commission in the past has come to council in 2009, 2011 timeframe and said, yes, let's look at selling that property to be able to bring revenue in, to be able to get some things accomplished at the cemetery. But again, at that point, we didn't have a master plan to know even how much, if we fully develop that area, what kind of time frame would that give us, which is 75 years based on what the design is on that previous page. So we've gone back and forth a lot on the conversation, should we have burials down to Southway, or does the main area along Southway, a couple acres there, need to be commercial to create a buffer between the cemetery and the business district through there? So as noted here, the master plan does recommend that developing the property for cemetery use is your longest and best investment, even though selling off the property, some of that portion of the property would give you immediate return, but your best long-term investment, and to be able to continue to have a cemetery located at one site would be to use that for cemetery use. As I've noted a couple times, public input wants to see that developed as cemetery use only. The third bullet point, as you all know, to be able to fund things anymore, we have to come up with alternate dollars. We just can't expect $750,000 to $1 million to go straight into a cemetery to be utilized towards expansion. So we've got to come up with, be more creative about how we address funding at that site. And that's where the discussion of, okay, do we look at selling property or not? Is that really going to help spur some of the development here? And then the last bullet point just notes that a majority of the commission at this time does not support the sale of the property. They are mixed on it, but a majority does not want to see that developed. The commission member that does want to see it sold and utilized does want to see restrictions put on that funding. I think there's a lot of concern within the commission that if we sell property, even though this council may say, yes, it's going to go back in the cemetery, the money can always be moved somewhere else. So if it does get sold, is that really going to help the cemetery down the road? Or is it going to be reallocated somewhere else where there's a higher need? So just noting there too that locating those funds within the perpetual care fund was a conversation that was discussed as maybe that's the best spot for it because then it does kind of protect it and then it can be invested. Although with perpetual care fund, you are limited to what percentage you can utilize from year to year. This is just a brief slide. I won't go through it. Just notes that this is something that we do have addressed within the department's strategic plan. That's obviously something that we really want to focus on across the city is anything we're coming and requesting of the council isn't something that we're just coming up with. It's something that has been identified as a need and falls within a strategic plan. So there's 15 various tasks that are noted within the department's strategic plan that you'll, I think, hear about next month more, related to the cemetery and the master plan and its development. So what we're looking at is, initially we were given the task to look at 4.5, 5.4, and then potentially address what the commission's position is on the undeveloped property. But we have agreed that each month we are going to be meeting monthly moving forward, at least through this year. We want to be able to break down all the chapters and review. There are some chapters that aren't going to take very long, but some where there is some updating that should occur. So it will be all hands on deck for the commission and putting this update together for eventually proposing it to council to adopt for the next 5 to 10 years before we come back and look at do we need to do another update moving forward. So we are, like I mentioned, creating a plan for reviewing the annual rate increases. And then what we'll do is we'll come back this spring. We'll be recommending some new rates. So that'll be before the master plan revision's completed. But that revision will probably come to you, might just wait till after the budget and get to you guys in September, October, once you have a lot more free time. Just wanted to note who our commission members are. We do have a very dedicated group and we have one vacancy. If you know of anybody that might be interested, we do talk more than just cemetery. We talk trees and we like to look through all the development review items that are coming forward to make sure that parking lot codes are being met and other urban forestry related projects are falling within our city code. But we have Shirley Phillips who's here, Maxine Miller, who I don't believe was able to make it, Elizabeth Getzinger, and Brian Hensley that are on our commission. They're a great group of community members that dig in deep for sure. They're definitely my most active and involved commission that I work with. Shirley does, before we answer questions, Shirley does have some things that she had prepared to speak to.
Shirley, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record. Remember to lift your voice.
You got it. Shirley Phillips, Lewiston, current chair of the Urban Forestry and Cemetery Commission. I'm pleased that the council is revisiting the cemetery master plan. And I hope this overview that Tim has given you is given you the background and kind of the thought process that the commission has been addressing at its meetings over the years. The members of the commission worked alongside the consultants in 2015 to develop the plan and have remained committed that it not just be a plan on the shelf, that it be an active document. Every effort's been made to move forward with a phased implementation of the plan. The commission felt that the past funding requests were modest, except for that 200,000, and would have shown progress. Had even one of those requests been adopted, there would be irrigation and there'd be perimeter trees bordering the now undeveloped property. The community would have received that signal that there was a commitment by the city to preserve the property for future generations. The commission has remained patient and understanding of the difficult budget decisions the council is faced with each year. Since the adoption of the master plan in 2016, the cemetery has lost that full-time, part-time position that was making great strides in the promotion and sales of the limited remaining grave sites. The operations have remained pretty much simply status quo and focused on the continued necessary attention to the grounds maintenance. And we've received lots of positive feedback from the community about the recent care and how nice the cemetery looks. I want the council to be assured that you've appointed a very dedicated, hardworking, committed Urban Forestry and Cemetery Commission. We'll continue to update the plan monthly in our meetings and report back to you. But I hope you don't confuse the lack of funding in the past for a lack of commitment by the commissioners for the future phased development of the cemetery. We see the Normal Hill Cemetery and the Arboretum as an asset to the rich cultural heritage and fabric of the city of Lewiston. We thank you for the opportunity to share our vision, and for the future, we hope that you will agree to keep the existing property intact for the many future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Thanks, Shirley. Councilors, any questions?
Mayor,
Councilor Forsman?
comments really, I guess. I think I read into somewhere that previous liaison weren't actively showing up to meetings.
Sorry, I forgot to allude to that. We did add that under the, it was at the end of the time of budgetary requests. So up until we had Councilor Kleberg on there, it was kind of a struggle to have our representative being supportive of us. So it's been really nice having Kleberg and then Spickelmeyer and now our new council member being involved. We felt, and the commission obviously feels like having a presence there from the council understands and knows and can be a part of those conversations where we weren't really having that prior to those. And so even building up through to the master planning process, it was hard because we didn't always have a lot of input from the council.
I think that just, the reason I pointed that out is I think that goes to show, hopefully, our current council, future councils, how important it is that we do come to those meetings as liaisons and be that support for those commissions. So hopefully that'll continue in the future with even future councils that you guys might get, and that they understand the importance of that, because obviously we're able to see some movements there. And then just the last note, a follow-up for I see City of Missoula has kind of a rate for the infant marked free. And more just a side note, might be something to consider for families that are having to lose a child and how difficult that might be. Personally, I thought that was kind of cool of Missoula to have that as there, but again, that's just a comment, but
That's
appreciate you
something
guys.
that stood out strong to me too.
Yeah, it did for me. But thank you for guys putting this together and bringing this to us, so it was very detailed.
Counselor Lidke?
On your position on the undeveloped land, it says public input from the neighbors and community showed support. That's from the original plan, correct? We have not,
2015.
so we haven't went out and asked again, and like got public's, because it's changed, we've got more dirt piles, things like that, and we haven't went out and surveyed again, correct?
We haven't, but that's something we can definitely discuss and plan to do.
And then,
This group likes to go door to door.
I think that's great, and I do think that a well-committed commission is very helpful. I do have budgetary concerns moving forward with the perpetual care fund. We are taking taxpayer dollars to cover the cost of a cemetery that not the entire public uses, and so when we talk about 4 burials a month at most was, I think, the top end of your 2 to 4, I think is what you stated. That's 48 a year. The traditional casket burial is not as popular as the less space of a urn. So I still am in support of looking at a portion of that, not all, to look at how we develop that and fund that through the sale of a piece of that property to put into perpetual care fund and long-term investments that would cover and probably, at least for several years, take off some weight from those taxpayer dollars, depending on how much and what we get for that piece of land. And it would create a buffer and could build into, I agree that we need to showcase our green spaces, but we also have a lot of green space, and I'm not sure that as inflation and cost of staffing, that we're going to be able to manage all of our green space. So I do have to take a look at that, and know that we need some expert input on what that looks like now after almost 10 years, as far as what cemetery experts say. And again, I think your commission is very dedicated, but we don't have an expert in the field of cemetery. And that's what I'd like to hear from, as far as where we regionally going with space of that nature.
Counselors?
One more.
Counselor Forsman?
To kind of go on that, on funding and figuring out that as well, I think obviously, I believe you said 2016 was the last rate increase that we had.
We've had 2, one was 2016, and then, I'm trying to remember if it was this last year was more related to the subcontracted services, and then I think the other rate increase was 2020 or 2021. But we will be creating a plan for annual rate increases.
I think that is obviously really important, especially looking at all the other things that we've had to bring up to the rate of inflation and making sure that's following in that path as well. I like that you guys put that we're trying to use less of the taxpayer dollars and trying to get more self-funded with that. And so I think that's gonna be really vital moving forward, so.
So, and I'm gonna throw in 2 cents, because I think I started this a while back. And when I look at the presentation here, and I mean to be critical, but not negative, okay? So when I look at what you provided today, when you talk about create a plan for annual increases and then present final update to the council for, or, pardon me, there was another one on here, going back to 15, to find resident in the cemetery code, these things were never done. And so when we talk about a lack of funding in the past, that may be true, but there were a lot of things within the plan that were never implemented either, that made it very difficult to accomplish, I think, the goals that were outlined in that plan. And I think it's only going to become more difficult in the future. I'm just being realistic about it. When you look at the mausoleum, how that thing is tripled, essentially. It's gonna become very, very expensive to own and operate a cemetery. So the challenges are out there. And I don't know how long the property tax, your levy's not gonna cover that. And I don't know how much more contributions you'll get from the general fund levy to help pay for those things, you know? And that's why I think we need to look at other options and how we manage the assets across the board. Whether we like that answer or not, I think that's the direction it's headed. That's just kind of what I see on that. So, yeah, no, I just throw that out, but I can't thank you enough for the time that you have put on this too. I'm not asking for that job, I know it's a tough job, but I just think that we could probably up our game a little bit, and I'm gonna be critical that way, you know, and try to get us to do the best that we can. I'm hopefully not going to be unreasonable about that either, but that's the position that I will take as I look at these things. So I would encourage you to work hard. I'll support you, you know, where I can, but I'll also give you some honest feedback too, so. Tim, if you could, Director Barker, if you could just quickly, because I want the counselors to get as much as they can out of yours and Shirley's time while you're here, but could you just very quickly explain to the council members about the perpetual care fund fee that you're required to pay through state statutes? So when they look at these rates, they understand kind of how some of this is working, so that we're comparing apples to apples.
Sure. Yeah, perpetual care fund, or perpetual care fee is built into the pricing structure when you purchase a cremation area, or if you're purchasing a plot that's meant for helping subsidize long-term management of the cemetery. So in a perfect world, your perpetual care fund would be at a rate where, let's say you're allowed to draw 150,000 out of it because you're, let's say, 4 or 5 million in your fund, then you're not gonna have to be subsidized by utilizing general funds. So ultimately, the area that we really need to increase the most in would be in what we're looking at as far as our fees going into would be the perpetual care fund. Obviously, our general costs need to help reduce those, the required use of the general fund, but that perpetual care fund is that long-term investment. It's kind of like the police retirement fund, I guess, to some extent. It hit a point where it was gonna be self-sufficient and sustaining, and so you can draw off your interest earned each year to be able to help manage that, and that's ultimately what the goal is. Part of the issue with having, a 125-year-old cemetery is you've got perpetual care that was paid for with a lot of these original plots of, even up into the 30s, they were $7. Well, $7 now isn't gonna get you, a whole lot in the long run to help subsidize what happened. So that's one of the structures that we're gonna be looking at is when we look towards increasing our fees, trying to allocate a fair amount of that to the perpetual care fund. And maybe Amy can answer it a little bit better, but we can only draw a certain amount because of state code from perpetual care. Sure, yeah.
So the perpetual care fund, you're limited to only being able to utilize the earnings off the fees that go into it. So you contribute the fee, And then the interest and the investment earnings on that fee can then be transferred out to help support the cemetery operations. So your perpetual care fund is also at the mercy of how the markets are performing as well, too.
Thank you, Amy. But I guess, Director Barker, what I wanted to also highlight is that Idaho statute sets that fee for you, and it's 10% of the fee. And so if you look at the city fees and what we charge, that 10% is included in that fee, whereas I know from the Memorial Gardens in Lewiston, their fee's a little bit higher, and they add that fee on top of that. So it's a different way to market that, and it's another thing that we might want to look at as a city, say, here's the fee, and then we add the 10% on top of that. Instead, we take it out of what we received today. Am I correct on that?
You're correct, yep.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, and that fee, the one thing I wanted to also mention is that fee can be used towards general maintenance and development as well. So there are areas that the funds can't go towards, but if we were looking to complete a $200,000 project, we could draw from that fund towards a project as well. So it's not just restricted to the maintenance. And again, that's set in state code.
I don't see any more questions. Thank you, Director, and we look forward to updates here in the near future. And Shirley, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, councilors, we move over to the other side of the page. Item F, Personnel Policy, Review and Discussion of the City of Lewiston's Personnel Policy. This is an action item. Councilor Lidkey, I think, handed something out for your review here today. Councilor Lidkey, I will turn this over to you.
So as we talked about last fall, that I felt like there was some language in the personnel policy that didn't help management and supervisors with leading their department through non-subjective disciplinary action and just different policies. So I gave you some notes as I went through the policy. As you know, Idaho is an at-will state. I asked Clerk Brocky to reach out to District 2 to find out if we were the norm or not. And in District 2, out of the 9 other municipalities, only the city of Nez Perce, Idaho, is for cause. Moscow, and the other 7, are at will. And I found that Moscow, being our most comparable city in size and functionality, being at will is something that we should take a look at.
Councilor, could you speak up loudly?
Yes.
We have folks scattered all over. This is
Sure.
pretty important. Yeah.
So I think there's a perception that for cause protects the employee, and I would disagree. It can certainly protect a not so great employee, because without documentation, you have a very hard time letting go of somebody that might be draining your department. And so as I looked through the personnel policy, I felt like there was some language that could be tightened up to really drive home to supervisors and department directors to ensure that they were leading their department without that subjectivity, having to follow. Later on in the policy, there is an actual progressive disciplinary action, but it is led to with language like, this may be used. And if you've ever led a team and you always take each case by case, but if you're not following some sort of regiment, it causes dissension amongst your employees, and they feel that you're being subjective, and it can cause more problems. So I would like us to consider looking at that. This is our document. This is how we help city staff lead their departments, by making sure that we're giving them clear direction. This is not something that the mayor or directors can change. This is only, it has to go in front of us. So I just, as you went through, and I can answer any questions, but the other thing I felt like there was, there's a lot of language in the personnel manual that talks about what non-exempt employees must do to justify their hours and report it. And a lot of that has to do with if they're non-exempt means we have to pay them overtime, so that's justified. But the other part of that justification is that people are checking in on time, arriving to work on time. And when we don't have that same expectation and accountability practice for people that are exempt, it can often be abused and there's no way to hold them accountable. And I think there should be something in this policy that does. Other than that, I did, so most of that is just creating the document so that there's clear lines of what should be done in an instance of disciplinary action and those sort of things. I did bring up telecommuting agreement, that we probably should look at providing equipment as a cost. So if we're providing a second computer to a staff, is that something we wanna be open to? Or do we look at a policy where if that person is approved for telecommuting, that they are given equipment that can be used both at the office and at home? So you can have a docking station at both and take a laptop back and forth, et cetera. Just things like that that can affect our budget. And then another big one that I would like us to consider is the prohibited criminal offenses, removal of any felony conviction. As you heard the gentleman talk about job challenge, we are in a workforce crisis. And we have area prisons that are having many people re-enter into the job force. And many of those are not violent, non-child related, non-sexual related, that I think we should not shut the door on those potential employees, especially when we talk about not being able to fill seasonal work or lower end steps. We're not appealing to the masses, and we have a lot of vacancies on the board. Opening that up and actually allowing city staff to work with the Department of Corrections on reentry could open the doors to those positions being filled. So just something for us to look at to maybe change that language while still protecting other city staff and the public. I think that can be easily done. And then as we walk through the compensation chapter, which is chapter 5, any step increases mid-year or 2-step increases, I believe needs to be included in a budgetary request the prior year. When you start doing mid-year increases that weren't planned, that adds to your budget fast. And 2-step increases definitely add to that. So either that needs to come in front of us in a budgetary request, or we need to look at removing the option of 2-step, which I don't necessarily advocate for, because I do think when you have a quality employee, you need the opportunity to provide a merit increase. And then the last page, I just talk again about the disciplinary action needs to be more concrete. I'm speaking to this from a leadership position that my direct reports that run divisions, when they are trying to document and discipline a person, it becomes a struggle when there's not a clear line of what they need to do in each situation. You will always take the situation on an individual basis. There's things like reasonable accommodations. Maybe the behavior is out of the norm and you have a discussion. That's still part of a progressive disciplinary. It's called coaching, but you need to document it. And you do that with an at-will situation as well. But this allows for the city to put clear lines of communication so that both the supervisor and the employee knows that and can refer back to the expectations that we have for them. So this was just my thoughts on paper on how we could beef that up and really help the leaders in our city tighten up how they deal with staffing issues, because they do occur in a municipality or in a private business. You have issues, and I've talked to city employees, and I've asked several of them in regards to some of these changes, and I have had quite a bit of support, especially from those that have supervisors. The at-will, maybe not so much, but again, I think that's the perception that they're protected.
Counselors, questions? Counselor Klein,
I like the idea of,
you have to speak up loudly, Counselor. There's folks in the back and then up top.
okay.
Yeah.
I like the idea of looking at these to possibly change. What do we need to do in order to make these changes to the policy?
So the personnel policy manual, if you read that, let's go to page 1. The policy manual. Okay. It says. Where it's at. This council basically writes the rules in the personnel policy manual, and it's their policy manual to adopt, and sets expectations for everything from salary to behavior to use of city equipment and these kind of things. And oh, did you find it? Yeah, so on page 5, it says City of Lewiston policy right there, so it would be the first worded page after the index. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth paragraph down, the last sentence says changes may be made at the sole discretion of the city council. So what Councilor Lidke has done is she has brought the rest of the council some of her concerns with the stated personnel policy of the city of Lewiston. And so if she chose, she could ask the council, the full council, to consider making changes to the policy, or another council could do the same thing, and you would do that by motion and getting a second, so that you could have debate on that. And if it passed, then there would be a change made to the policy manual. So that's kind of the simple steps in that process. But I think the point she's trying to make that this is the council's manual, and staff can't change it, the mayor can't change it. It's entirely up to the city council.
Are we,
Councilor Forsman?
discussion wise, are we able to ask questions from our staff stuff, or are we just talking about these particular items?
Councilor, this is a work session. We're just discussing this. So if you would like to call someone up, we can certainly do that if we're available.
Thank you. So what is the process when there's an employee issue? Is first leadership do it on their own, or they always involve HR first steps?
Director
Sorry.
Province, are you available?
Call you. You're in the thick of it, so.
Yeah, so the personnel policy outlines.
Please introduce yourself. Yep, thank you.
Nikki Province, HR Director, City of Lewiston. So the personnel policy outlines several ways to discipline an individual. As Councilor Lidke was talking about, progressive, where you start with like a notice of discussion, which kind of, you've counseled that person, and it explains all this in there, but you've counseled a person, now you're documenting it because it's not improving, goes on to an official reprimand. Any point, you can jump those steps if they're so egregious that need be. But generally, HR will help the supervisor through those processes, advise, possibly, and most of the time, write some of those official reprimands or PIPs, which is a performance improvement plan. So we're very usually involved in that and will help the supervisor along. Part of what our job is.
This
Counselor Forsman.
Sorry, thank you, follow up. I know that we went over this personnel policy, and I think there was a discussion between at will and for cause, like a year and a half, well, two and a half years ago now, I think, right? It was right before the new council came on.
Yeah, this was brought up to the previous council, and they elected to go back to for cause. They didn't want to go forward with at will. I think the situation is when you're making that change to at will, you're only affecting a portion of our employee group. So you've elected to sign collective bargaining agreements, those are all for cause. So the only people you're actually affecting by the at will change is non-represented.
Follow up, sorry. Are they having issues currently with that being for cause? Is that cause issues with leadership that you're aware of, that they're having a hard time being able to effectively hold people accountable for their actions?
If I had to speak personally, I would say only in times when a supervisor didn't take appropriate action to document and move discipline along. Sometimes it can feel like an employee takes a while to get the discipline moving forward, potentially even into termination. But if you follow the process appropriately, and it awards that employee an opportunity to improve, to progress, to do better, before ultimately making a decision to terminate.
And they have to, either for cause or at will, either one has to have documentation in order for.
It would be my advice, even at will, to properly document, just because you wouldn't want to be stuck in a situation of potentially being accused of discrimination or retaliation or not making an accommodation.
Counselors, further questions for Nikki? I'm also reminded here, counselors, that another way to do this, obviously with the changes by resolutions, which we've done since you've been on the council, except for Counselor Klein. And with that resolution, we'd have a red line copy of the manual that would show items that are struck out and then items that are underlined or added to the policy. So a couple of different ways to do that, I suppose.
I'll just speak my
Yeah,
opinion.
Counselor Forsman.
My biggest concern with it right now is that we already have, obviously, our representative employees that have a lot more backing and I feel like support, and then us to move to only affect a certain amount of groups with this, to move that for at will instead of for cause, is further gonna feel like they're not represented as well. And so I'm not opposed to changing some of the language in here to make it a little more clear, but as far as moving it from cause to at will, I'm not in support about this current time. I'm not seeing enough of an argument for that.
I agree. Counselors?
I think I would support seeing the red line like you talked a little bit ago, so it'd be easier to visualize it than just in a generalization in this. Can't put it together in my head.
Counselor Ledke?
Can we identify the non-represented staff that would be included, that this would affect? I'm assuming directors, and
Director Province, can you help us out with this?
Someone called me up. Yeah, I came prepared. It's about 119 full-time staff would be affected. It includes directors, it includes library employees, transit drivers, our senior nutrition cooks, most of our, administrative staff. So it's about, and then all of our regular part-time staff, which is in the 40-ish people. So we currently have 295 full-time staff. So the other 170 some are collective bargaining. And if you were to look at our non-represented pay scale, that would show you all the positions that are non-represented. So I'd be happy to send that out to you if you'd like. It's also posted on our HR website.
Counselor Ledke?
if I can just speak, this is not, and I certainly do not want to go after the library staff or the senior nutrition. This is really, this language is more about holding leadership accountable and being leaders of their department. I truly feel like when we look at those non-representative staff, well, first of all, it's almost half, not quite. So it's not a few select people. And I also look to the mayor as one of those leadership staff that needs to have a policy that we put in place so that he can lead his direct reports as well. And I think that when we sit here in this room and we need to do the best for everybody involved. And we go through collective bargaining, and you're right, they're way more represented. But this document is ours to ensure that we're making it fair for everyone, and including holding accountable the leadership within the city. And that's just, my personal opinion is that we, as a country, as a society, we need people to be leaders. And we need language within these policies to ensure that we are creating accountability within that. This is not about the low man on the totem pole, except giving them a voice and giving the accountability where it needs to be, which is up top and on down. So this isn't an attack on non-represented staff. This is about leadership, and our leadership is non-represented.
So councilors, if I can just add a couple of comments here. You know, it's always a good idea to review the work that's been done in the past. So just like every time there's an evaluation, performance evaluation, I ask to have the job descriptions reviewed and rewritten because things change in a year. So you can certainly do that with this personnel policy manual too, is to make updates to that. So it sounds like, Councilor Lidke, we could put this into a redlined version of some of the changes that you'd like to have the council members to consider, and then bring that back, because then I think what that will do is that will allow the council to look at these, you know, possibly one by one and vote on them individually instead of voting on changing the entire policy at one time, because that would be a rather large motion and maybe a little bit confusing. But if we did that, we could bring that back and look at that, and that would open it up too for other councils that might want to add something to the policy manual or change something in the policy manual. So if that seems reasonable, then I guess what I would ask, because I'm going to have to administer the policy, is to ask if councilors could submit their suggested changes, you know, additions or subtractions to the policy manual, maybe submit them to our Director of Province at the Human Resources Department, and ask her to bring that back in a future work session. So if we said like a month in March's work session, which would be March 1st, I think.
Can I just add too that generally the idea was that we would bring the personnel policy back to you at the beginning of every year. I kind of held off because there was already a proposed agenda item. And so I do also have additional edits to make to the personnel policy that are suggested by legal and others. So if I could include those as well, if you're open to that, that would be great too.
Thank you, Director. Those are good comments. Councilors, if you're okay with that, that gives you approximately a month. And it's important that you familiarize yourself with that because it is your policy. And it gives you, you know, some say in how the city operates, you know, and then it's my job to be the administrator. So, so if we all say that seems like a pretty good idea, it sounds like Director Province is already working on some of those. Or if you just get your suggested edits to her in the next couple of weeks, maybe. And then what we'll bring back to you is a redlined version of the changes, the proposed changes, again, deletions are stricken through and additions are typically double underlined. And then you could vote on whether or not to make those changes. And we just go right through those and handle those one at a time. Counselor Klein?
Can we ask that Ms. Provence emails the counselors her suggested changes, her recommended changes beforehand, so we're not overlapping on?
Let's ask her. Director Provence, did you hear the question?
Yeah, and mine kind of have to do outside of some of these. We were gonna look at the felony portion of it. Honestly, that's something that's come up from a multitude of conversations. So that was something that we were going to look at potentially modifying. But others are just some additional like military leave provisions that need to be more standardized with federal law and other items. So, but I can incorporate anything that you guys are interested in.
Counselor Forsman?
Just a comment. I did like the idea of what Counselor Leakey said with, said, with the, opening up that kind of, for those getting out of, prison, that they would have options, obviously, reserved, right? We have to be careful who we're hiring, but with having that kind of a little more open there so that we can have people fill those vacancies, give those people maybe a leg up. So I liked that part of this discussion, and I would look forward to see that in that red line and what that might look like.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, I think we're clear on that. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselors, next up, we move to item G, and I see we have one of our all-stars here. Item G, Capital Improvement Plan discussion by the Public Works Advisory Commission on making a citywide capital improvement plan per Councilor Forsman's December 11th, 2023 motion. This is an action item, and so Councilor Forsman, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Well, I talked to Dustin prior to coming in to the meeting, just so I made sure I have my verbiage right and I understood everything. And with talking to him, as far as a whole city-wide, didn't seem as beneficial to add like Parks and Rec and everything in there, because they are gonna be off of different funds, and we just didn't wanna confuse anything for the public, so like what funds can go where, and so more of a 5-year plan for capital improvements, but having more of a breakdown of the sewage, water, how much is it gonna cost, if we tear up this road, what are we gonna have to repair a pipe within that? So kind of having that more laid out, and as you guys saw in the packet, I had this sent out, it kind of shows you in other cities examples of how they lay out like the funding sources, so the general fund, the gas tax measure, downtown parking enhancement, so it kind of lays out those. And Dustin agreed that there's some room for improvement there to make it more clear for the public, so they know kind of where that money is coming from and what it would be allocated to, but not going too broad, so kind of focusing on a 5-year instead of like what years from now, because depending on new councils or where money comes in, that could change. So we just kind of want to make sure we're biting the elephant one bite at a time. But obviously creating clarity for those, the public as well as us on council, hopefully. So I don't know if you wanted to kind of dive more into that, Dustin, but that was kind of the purpose of that.
Director Johnson.
Good afternoon, Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. I think high level, I think Councilor Forsman hit the big points. I think from Public Works perspective, we're going to have here in February the transportation CIP adoption, and I think there's typically a little over 150 projects on that. I don't see those all being constructed as they're formed today, as is in any world. Your wishes and wants and needs are going to outpace your revenue, so you're always best to prioritize your revenue and where you can put those towards projects. So, I think a lot of what we do, I won't give you the whole spiel, I have to save it for February when we go through the CIP, but trying to get a clearer message. Staff has been working with the council and ourselves, trying to come up with a more concise budget strategy. I think we've all kind of, with change of government, kind of tried to try and stick with the same method, but we're losing transparency, and it's not a fact of trying to deliberately being less transparent in that we stick with these old methods because they're tried and true, but yet at the same time, there's newer technologies, there's fresher eyes in staff and fresher eyes in council that I think we can do a better idea or better presentation of how we get this information out there. The concept that was included in your packet is something that I think I really want to strive for. It was easy for me when I started about 2 or 3 years ago. We had 5 projects, basically a new well, a wastewater treatment plant, a water treatment plant. So I could get up here and tell you, generally on a one-page list, these are where we're gonna spend $100 million in the next 5 years. Well, that's closing out. So we need to be more strategic, combining the projects when they go, timing-wise. Funding is always going to be a challenge. I use the term quite a bit as far as the color of money. One grant can't be used for something else, or, water revenue can't be used for parks. General funds, have limitations, and so when we get out there and trying to communicate this stuff, why did you build that stupid project? Well, it was because that was a grant, it was listed on the CIP, and it was basically free money, so that's why we constructed it. So the better we can communicate that, and I think the bridge that we're missing between the budget and concept is a 5-year work plan. A plan where you can sit there with a matrix, look across, see where the funding, see the projects, see the funding sources and where it's programmed out. Because I don't have the capacity to program out all of the 150 transportation projects, the 300 that are identified in wastewater and water and stormwater. So, but I think if we can give you a 5-year kind of a forecast out, that's the starting point. And then we can have a much more educated, transparent conversation about where a regional park might fit into this, where Fenton Gym can fit into this, and how we can interface with Public Works and facilities and all the other departments within the city. So that was my 2 cents.
Director, I have a question. So when you talk about a 5-year plan, are you talking about producing a new document, or are you talking about consolidating?
Consolidating, it will be a new again, how we've done the budgets in the past is, at most, we've done a 2-year budget, and that's adopted formally by the council. This 5-year working document, or 3-year, or whatever lifespan we want to put on it, would not it's just a roadmap. It isn't necessarily we will be at this date. It gives us a direction. We have all that information. It's just compiling it and consolidating it into a form that the public can easily digest. I have 40 hours plus a week to sit here and look at all these documents and get a better understanding of how we're going to strategize it. And it's even harder for me, being an engineer, to communicate that to somebody who may not have a background. But yes, to try and work forward a consolidated document that can be clearly communicated to a non-technical, I want to be able to, if a taxpayer has a question on a project that's going on, here's the description of the project, and here's where it fits into our plan. End of story.
Well, thank you, Director, and I'd like to add to that. For Ms. Laura's benefit, I did read the minutes from that advisory committee, and I did go pull the city of Pittsburgh and reviewed it, just so you know that we do pay attention. So, but in the first plan, though, from Walnut Creek, it talks about CIP projects which are not fully funded. And I think that's an important statement that goes on here. It says the unfunded projects highlight the need to identify funding sources for projects that are large, complex, where no dedicated source of funds have been identified. And I think that's important for the council here, because I know you probably saw Johnson & Johnson on front page the other day, but we both, I think, share a vision of trying to get Main Street put together. We've been talking about this for a long time, and we have to start talking about that early so that we can start identifying funding sources for that. And council's gonna get to vote on it, But one of the proposals is to take some of our current budget capacity and dedicate that to this project and bond against that. So it means we're gonna do something less for a few years with those monies and service that bond. But it's one way, it's a plan to try to get some of these larger projects out of the plan, right? And get them done. So, but I think it's very important for the council, because you set the budget, you're making those policy decisions. And I think part of that is to look beyond the current year and try to identify some funding sources which is gonna mean moving dollars around. You might say, well, I don't wanna fund this year because we're gonna start saving for this, or we're gonna do something else, but very key to this. Otherwise, I think we probably find ourselves back at ground zero and with a bunch of plans on the shelf and nothing happening.
That is my pet peeve, is to look at these wonderful plans that go all the way back to the 50s that didn't go anywhere. They're interesting, you can see the perspective of where they went, but my goal is to not be the producer of these plans. In 50 years, they look back and want to know why the Johnson & Johnson's thought that was so important, without having support on how to build off of that. When you identify a project as number one, as Main Street's number one, that's our marching orders to move forward, and we're gonna put that in a work plan, we're gonna put it in motion. And, being the Public Works Department, yes, we can design it, but can we build it? Can we fund it? Can we afford it? How do we move forward? And without having a full picture of that, you're not doing really a favor for those who are making those decisions.
Councilor Forsman?
And to highlight doing, not having the full picture, I think that really, when we're in a meeting and they're kind of like, well, asking in the details, because obviously it's not just the road, there's, what's under the road, and there's businesses surrounding, and what's that gonna look like as far as the whole entire end project, what's that gonna cost? And I don't feel like we have that as breaked out as much as we could have to help us make those decisions of where we're moving money. Also what money we can put in what pocket without causing any issues, because you have to be careful where you put money. We can't just take money from somewhere and then just put it there because we want to. There's obviously restrictions where we're taking money from. So I think that'd be good for us to have, as well as the public to be able to see and go, okay, I know where this money's coming from. I know why they couldn't spend that money there. And then hopefully too, they'll know if Main Street is our highlight, this is how much it's totally gonna cost, and where are we gonna start putting that money, and how are we gonna get there? And this was something that our Public Works Commission was really dedicated on, and hoping to be advocates for the citizens of Lewiston. And so that's kind of why they brought this to the table, and in looking more at some other cities that have done a little more detail on that, I think it might be a good step forward. And we don't have to make a whole wide plan, city capital plan yet, but maybe something more in detailed, I think, would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think moving forward, staff has already, our working budget group has already been in discussion as how we can streamline the budget process. My 2 cents working on that group, kind of bouncing off feedback we've been getting from the Public Works Advisory Council. I think we will continue to do that. I think you'll start seeing how this is changing at the next, as we start working towards the budget process. In the meantime, I think we'll just keep working on what we're working, unless I got, any other I'm here for feedback to, if there's something specific that you'd like, if it's a 3-year work plan, 5-year work plan, 7-year work plan, the issue becomes as we work through this, too much information bogs us down. We want something concise. Too much information is not good enough, but not enough information is not also beneficial, so.
Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. I kind of see this, and I kind of think a 5-year plan is probably the most efficient right now, but I see it as an overlay. Because when we put this Main Street as our #1 project, I was asked why. And when we open up that project, there's a lot of stuff in that box that has got to go in and out of there. And most people don't even know what it is. So an overlay basically shows you that there's vaults down there, and we still haven't determined who owns those vaults and who pays insurance and who has to maintain them. We have sewer, and how far down is there? And they're 100-year-old pipes. And this goes on, and this project is one of the biggest projects that I think the city is gonna be taking on. And for everybody to be able to see an overlay of what goes in that hole when we open it up. Because I never think about it as transportation. When we were talking about this as the #1 project, I didn't even think about transportation. It was all the stuff that's in the hole that has to be done before we finish the surface for transportation. So I was really kind of stupid at that point. I didn't even think about it as transportation. I just see everything underneath. So I think an overlay is kind of in my opinion, an easy way to describe this.
Counselor Spicklemeyer?
So, Director, in something like this, is this something we do internally? We write our own 5-year plan?
I would take all of our master plans and our CIPs and, you know, base off of where they kind of are recommended, where the budget is, and put together, you know, when we adopted the stormwater master plan, it had a CIP and it had I think it was a 5-year plan. Yeah, it had a 5-year plan. And so that one, that's basically the model that's how that does. And so we'll just do it with all of our enterprise funds and utilities and overlay it.
So is it something that could be done ready before or at the same time as the FY '25 budget plan?
That's my goal, is to have something put together for your guy, for everybody to review. It will be the first one, so it'll be a rough drawing. But from my perspective, we have all this data. There's nothing, it's just a matter of getting it all in one place for you to see. And there's gonna be a lot of gray areas, you know, stormwater is one where, you know, it's a new utility, and so how much money is gonna be available, so how do you program that out? You know, there's a lot of gray areas, but, you know, like I said, in the beginning, we know we're gonna build this because it's in this year's budget. Year 5, that's a little more gray.
I think it'd be great if we stick to it.
I that's the thing that, you know, when I walked in the doors here, I wanted to say, it just seems, tell me what you're working on and what you're gonna work on next year. It's a simple question, and then as you start laying all the layers, it gets a little bit more complicated, but I think you should be able to paint that picture a little bit more transparent than we are now.
Counselor Spicklemeyer?
So what's the movement to make it happen? Is it, he just does it, or?
I wish, yeah.
Snap the fingers, man.
You know, unfortunately, you know, there's been a lot of staff turnover. There's been a lot of, you know, other projects that have taken our attention. And so it's carving out the staff time, kind of having a work session. I mean, this is great, but I need to have this same thing with our staff, which I got the meeting invitation this afternoon. So we'll start throwing things on paper and coming up with concepts. And I may, you know, have another work session to show you kind of where we're at. Ultimately, I'm hoping to have something a little bit more firmed up for you know, we're already working on the budget. And so now we'll just work on the next couple other budgets moving forward. And the problem, and I talked with Council Forsman, is, you know, you have a catastrophic event like a reservoir, or the opposite of that, where you get a big grant, that shifts everything. And so but that helps us have that conversation of what does that do in 2026 that we thought we were gonna do, but now we're not.
Director, could you give us 60 seconds and no more? Comments on cartograph and GIS?
Yes. So that is the basis of all of our tools, and that's really what this, behind the scenes, we've been inputting all of the data within our city. So stormwater, all of that infrastructure now lives electronically on a spatially GIS. So you can pull up a map, click anywhere in the city, click on an intersection, and be able to see how big the sewer line is, when it was installed, what type of material, any deficiencies in it. Same thing with water. And so that is where we go for analyzing the efficiencies. And so we can run a query report and say, show me the bottom 10% of the ratings for wastewater pipes, and it'll populate a map and show you where that. And so we have staff that, you know, as we're starting to get this system more robust, we can take a look at it and we can start overlaying concepts of saying, this road is bad, it coincides with a bad water line and a bad sewer line, so let's pool that together and do one project.
Thank you. Right on time.
Very good.
Counselor City, other questions? No, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Laura, too, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Roman numeral 4, unfinished new business. City Councilor comments. Councilor Forsman.
I just want to thank all the staff for bringing all the information to us. It's a lot of time. I know Dustin blocked out several hours to be able to have paperwork ready and then information ready for it, as well as meeting me ahead of time, which was helpful because Public Works can be a lot of complexity in there and all the different mechanisms that go into that. So I just want to thank the staff for all the time that they put into these presentations and bringing us information so we can best make decisions for the city.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other comments? Okay, item B, city boards and commission liaison updates.
Last one, real quick. Just want to thank the commission, for Public Works Commission, that they're super dedicated and excited and trying their best to find somewhere they can get in there and get their nails in deep and make differences. So more to come on that. I'm excited to see where that goes. And I know Dustin and I talked about kind of some things we could do with the commission so they can make some changes. So and help out as well as be advocates for the citizens of Lewiston. So appreciate your guys' service.
Counselor Schroeder.
Yes, on the Lewis Clark Valley MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. And and the Home and Garden Show in March, I know that's a whole month away, but it seems like the months go a lot faster right now. But we will have some of our associates that are working on, this one is on the Thane Road study, and they will be at the Home and Garden Show on March 15 and 16. So find their booth and go and see what they're doing for planning on our Thane Road study.
Thank you, Counselor. If there are no further comments there, item C, mayor comments. Mayor's gonna phone a friend. Kayla, can I call you up to the stand? And would you, these are my comments, would you mind, since we talk about our commissions and liaisons and how important they are to the city, could you just give a 60-second update? First annual volunteer appreciation reception we had last Friday, and then kind of where that's going, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Kayla Herman, City Attorney, starting now. So our volunteer appreciation reception was a success. I'll be the first to admit I was hoping we would have gotten more of our volunteers there. However, I also know it was a Friday night and people have families and other things to do after a long work week. But we had between 30, 35, maybe 40 most volunteers come. We had great food. The mayor said some words. It was a really great chance for some of our counselors and other advisory board and commission members and other volunteers not tied to the advisory boards to really mingle with each other and for us to also learn, what they need from us and ways that we can all succeed together as a city. So we haven't started talking budget requests yet. However, this is something I would like to continue. So whether or not we do that on an annual basis or every 2 years, those are things that we can talk about. But I do have some ideas to hopefully make it a little bigger and better next year. But overall, thank you for your support and allowing me to do that. And I think that they were very appreciative. Did I make it, Dustin? Did I keep? A little.
Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you.
Get the hook
Yeah,
next
it was a
time.
very nice event for those of you that had a chance to stop by, but, we can't say enough for our volunteers at the city. We appreciate all that they do. Item D, agenda topics. Councilors? Okay. Adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Kleber to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you.